All right. Okay. So welcome to the session. So first of all, so I'm Jean. I'd like to first of all turn this into a question instead of a statement because I don't have an answer, and I'm hoping that we could explore together whether AI could be used to help us gain wisdom. So just a little bit about why I got this on this journey. So I spent 4 years with Hanson Robotics. It's an AI company creating robots that look just like you and me. One of the creations is Sophia the robot. So our company's mission is we really want to design AI for good so that they could help us solve some of the biggest problems that we've created as humans because they will be soon super intelligent. So we're really happy to have Sophia represent, good project. For example, UNDP as the innovation champion. But then what I found out recently is with machine learning, because right now, probably over 90% of the time when we talk about AI, we're talking about machine learning. So we no longer need to program machines. So basically we feed it a lot of training data. It's either labeled or unlabeled data, and then it learns from the data to create patterns. So what could go wrong? So I don't know whether you remember a few years ago, Microsoft created a chatbot called Tay and put it online for people to chat with it. You know, within 24 hours, it's talking about it's talking like a racist, it's basically swearing at people not because the AI is bad, it's actually because people are bad. It's talking bad things to the AI. So it is actually learning from human behavior, human actions. So what could go wrong with that? You know, the world is going after fully autonomous AI, and there's a lot of challenges and risks involved. Of course, there are exciting opportunities of what AI could do. There are a lot of questions about AI ethics, about this black box AI that we can't really explain how they make decisions. So we have no idea whether they're going to actually make decisions that are supporting human values. So, like I said, AI is learning from us, right? Right now it's learning from our actions. Soon it will be learning from our thoughts, because I think many of you might have read that now AI could actually translate brain EEG into language. So which means that actually they could read our thoughts very, very quickly. So what I found out is after spending 4 years working to create AI to be intelligent, I really think that, I want to spend probably the rest of my life trying to facilitate humans to be wiser, starting from myself, of course. So this is where I started my journey. And so I was looking at what I could do that, I think would make a difference. So looking at it, all these problems of the world as defined by the World Economic Forum, climate change, wars, income inequality, poverty, religious conflict. We're so familiar with all these issues. And, as I went through this journey, I was pretty much, to be honest, I was very overwhelmed. I don't even know where to start because all these problems are so huge. And of course, there's a lot of very smart people, very well endowed organizations trying to resolve these issues. But what I find is they are resolving individual issues, obviously because they're funded by certain organizations that have certain interests, but I'm really interested in looking at the root cause. And what is the root cause? We're becoming so connected nowadays, but we're becoming so disconnected, as individuals and as societies. So what is the root cause of all these problems? And I think we know that, right? It's ignorance. At the end of the day, it's a mind problem. So then, I remember thinking that this is even more overwhelming. How do you? But, I always thinking that, yes, it's a big problem, but it has a very long lever. If you do a little bit to address that problem, maybe one person at a time, like I said, starting with myself and, my immediate circles, then maybe you could effect change, with a very long lever with a lot of leverage. So, which brings me to the journey that is relevant to the topic today about wisdom. So the three questions I wanted to explore today, and also as part of my journey, is first, why is it important to talk about wisdom? So, we tend to talk about a lot of things, how to learn a lot of things, but actually I haven't come across a lot of educational programs that specifically talks about how to learn wisdom. And then the second, of course, is what is wisdom? It seems to be this fuzzy thing that we all know what is it about, but when we start talking to people, everybody has a very different interpretation of what is wisdom. And finally, maybe this is controversial, I don't know, that's why I want to turn this into a question. Can AI be used to help us gain wisdom, and why would we want to do that? So I just want to throw this in because this was very interesting to me. As I went through and looked at all the definitions of wisdom, and there are a lot, this one kind of popped out. It's how actually the researchers in UC San Diego were able to correlate the different neuroanatomical locations in a brain with components of wisdom. And I'll talk about those components shortly. So they've identified 7 components of wisdom. Some of them won't be a surprise to you, but personally, there are a couple of surprises to me. And they were able to correlate that with a region in the brain. So what are these components? One is emotional regulation, the ability to control and manage your emotions, which is quite basic, right? The second one is self-awareness and understanding. It's pretty obvious. Critical thinking, good judgment. And then the fourth one, I guess for me, pro-social behavior, I am a little bit surprised. Of course, good intention, compassion, it's not a surprise, but pro-social behavior means actually wisdom is contextual. It depends on the culture, it depends on the environment, depends on the social setting, which to me, it's a surprise because I always thought that there's this universal morality, universal wisdom that is beyond context. And then the fifth one is actually quite important that we don't give it enough attention, is understanding that life is uncertain and being able to deal with that uncertainty. And then 6 is believe in a higher consciousness and thriving. And so that we are always thriving for self-transformation and flourishing as human race. And lastly, but of course not least, is integrity, moral values and actions. So having said that, then, what are some of the challenges in creating a truly wise AI? One, of course, is all this context requires the AI to know interrelationships and causality, which is not so easy. The second one, which is actually challenging for humans as well, is to be present, right, in the time, place, and circumstances of the moment to be able to make the right decisions there and then. So it needs contextualization. Sorry, I have it repeated. And non-reacting. So we need to be not a robot when we interact with our environment and with everybody else, which is not what chatbot's about. Chatbots, interestingly, is always sort of reacting. So it's kind of a different way of looking at the design of AI. And then empathy, right? So they need to think like us and feel what we feel, to have empathy. And then self-relevance. They actually need to have some sort of a personal experience to be able to have that. So right now, where I am is I've come up with some concepts about creating artificial wisdom. So this is very ideas, but of course, I'd love to collaborate with anybody who's interested. I'm talking to a couple of scientists about possibilities. So the first, I think is very important, is to set the right goal and expectation. So we're not trying to create a fully autonomous, wise AI, because that would be, it's actually the $1 billion question, or the $1 billion project that everybody is working on. but I'm looking at building an AI that helps humans gain wisdom. Let me see. Okay, so the second one is there are different AI designs. So I'm proposing a hybrid approach to developing AI. So what is the hybrid? So the first one is it's based on creating an expert knowledge system. So this is sort of like creating a healthcare knowledge system where somebody has some symptoms and the knowledge system allows the AI to go through and diagnose what the problem is. So similarly, I think it's really important to have a base. Like you and I, we were born with a nature that hopefully is enabling us to have moral values, culturally and also universally, right? We kind of have that coming from a different culture and coming as the same human race. So I believe that actually there needs to be that nature part of the AI as well, to make sure it doesn't just run off and learn bad stuff like Tay. And the second part is important because the AI needs to evolve with us and it needs to be contextualized. So I'm talking about basically taking that machine learning tool and for the AI to learn and validate some of the hypotheses that it has based on its nature so that this could be personalized and contextualized. And the methodology is, first of all, we have to start with a data set because we have machine learning. So what are the variables that we need to collect, right? So based on looking at, what variables makes somebody wise, so we're talking about something that's measurable, for example, thoughts, words, actions. So we could, further split these into different categories, but basically we're talking about the 7 components of wisdom that I just introduced and turning those into different variables that are measurable. And the second one is there's this concept of amplification. And because when we think about good actions, there's certain things that would amplify that into sort of a better thought. So if we want something good to happen to somebody, if it's just sort of like a thing that we think we should do, then it has less impact. But if it's coming from the right intention, and then if we're emotionally engaged and more emotionally involved in that, then that has amplification. And then of course there's the context, right? The situation, the environment. So these are data sets that I think is actually possible to collect and can be quantified. And then of course we have to define a process to collect that data set. So I'm proposing that we look at daily actions. And we could look at a lot of different sensors to be able to collect those kind of actions, because we're talking about words and behavior, right? Thoughts, it's possible to collect it, but probably not in the version 1 of this effort. And then the thing that I think that is preventing a lot of systematic effort in learning wisdom is because it's hard to track and it's hard to know what the results are. So there isn't like a reinforcement mechanism, which is really important in learning everything. Within sort of the, I guess, religious institutions, there is, because that's the guru, right? The guru would track you and reinforce your behavior. But as normal people, if I'm talking about as a secular way of approaching this, we need actually the app or the AI to be able to track and reinforce this behavior. So this is, again, it's the starting point. And I'd like to sort of welcome anybody to join in this exploration. It's very, I know it sounds really ambitious, but if we break it down into steps, into sort of measurable variables, and start with stages, I think it can be done. Okay, so I'm now gonna open it up to questions. Anybody have questions, thoughts, feedback, objections?
Alors, je sais pas comment je rentre. C'est gentil, mais je vais pas le boire. C'est quoi, c'est le rosé? Ouais. Oui, c'est adorable, mais pas tout de suite.
Who's speaking? Is it Thomas?
Oh, sorry.
Do you have any thoughts?
No, sorry, I just forgot to switch off my microphone.
Sure. So, check the time. So we have about 10 minutes. I don't know whether anybody else has any ideas about how to approach this.
Hi, I really like your presentation, thanks. And I'm wondering, how would you define interpreting wisdom to AI through philosophy or psychology, or how would you see that unfold, the data sets you're going to be putting in? Is it like Greek philosophy, or what's your thought on that?
Sure. I mean, it's a really great question because it's going to touch on all these different domains. But what I want to do is I want to approach it in a way that we could break it down into specific variables that's measurable, that could be tracked. So I guess instead of saying, philosophy, okay, so maybe I could talk about an example. So there's this concept that, for example, in Buddhism, basically there's an imprint, right? When you think of something, the thought would translate it into a specific results. So it's sort of like, it's very scientific. So it's sort of like if you want to create a watermelon, if you want to grow a watermelon, you better plant a watermelon seed and water it. So this is the concept of imprint. If you want to have a result, so like a happy marriage, for example, then you have to think specific thoughts. And then you have to reinforce those thoughts on a daily basis, moment by moment basis, weekly basis, yearly basis. So this is the concept where if I have sort of an app or sensors to be able to track these individual thoughts that are measurable, and at the end of it, tell you, where you are in the progress, then I would be able to, the AI would be able to sort of tell you whether you're heading in the right direction and whether you're actually going to grow that watermelon. So going back to your question, I guess philosophy, love of knowledge, it's going to have a lot to do with it, but I want to avoid going into sort of the realm where things are going to be hard to define and hard to track and hard to quantify.
Sure.
So I just curious. So I mentioned that when I started this process, this journey to try to learn wisdom, a lot of information is all over the place. It's not like you said, you're trying to learn how to create a website. There's a lot of programs about it. There's a lot of people who have really good programs, doing self-development, self-transformative projects, but there isn't sort of a systematic way of learning wisdom. So, I don't know whether it's something that you would find interesting, or is it sort of too big of a topic, or is it too fuzzy a topic? I'm just curious whether people are interested in a systematic way of learning wisdom.
Hi, Jean.
Hello, Yusuf.
Hello. Yeah, I have a question actually. I think wisdom, when we talk about wisdom, it's different for different people. So can you define it for us? What you mean by wisdom?
Sure. Okay. So this is not my definition. I've actually looked through a lot of literature about um, what wisdom is, and this is one definition that I think could could be termed as distillation of many different definitions. So these 7 components, what I mentioned. So emotional regulation, self-awareness, understanding, critical thinking, good judgment, and then pro-social behavior, looking out for the group instead of for yourself, and then dealing with uncertainty, that's really important, and going after self-transformation and believing that there is a way to have humans thrive and flourish as a species, and then having that basic integrity, moral values and actions. So I think a lot of definitions sort of come down to these 7 things. Of course, you could always come up with something else, but I'm just saying that, right now, based on a lot of the literature that I've read, these 7 things very well define what wisdom is according to a lot of people who are researching this topic.
Then can you give us an example of a definition of based on these?
Oh, an example?
Yeah.
Well, I guess in the past when we talk about, that's the other interesting part, is that it seems like we know wisdom is important, but we've always thought that this is something that is, not for mere mortals. So we've kind of said, okay, all these historical figures like Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, maybe your guru are wise. But it's more rare for us to, talk about somebody who's kind of have wisdom, right, in a daily life. I don't know whether that's your experience. We describe them as intelligent, as compassionate, but I don't know, I very seldom hear people describe somebody as a mere mortal as wise. So if you talk about an example, I guess if we talk about aspirational, then I would say, okay, it seems like consistently we look at Jesus, Muhammad, or of course, any other religious leaders as wise.
Hello, Jane.
Yes.
We are a AI company, okay, a startup company. We have been doing something not exactly this, but along the lines, and that's a cognitive system. And there we found out that we need to have actually 3 things incorporated into as a system, not as machine learning or it's a continuous learning.
Mm-hmm.
In that, there is like faith. We need some kind of a way to bring it in, the belief system that we have, and the reasoning. When we get these 3 systems or concepts embedded into the cognitive system, then I think the wisdom part will automatically come. What do you think?
Yeah, sure. I think it's definitely. But I'd like to add to that, because when we talk about cognitive science, we're talking about a body of knowledge, right? How to do things, mostly how to do things, and knowing things and how to do things. But when we talk about wisdom, a lot of times we're talking about um, acting or not acting. It's sort of more related to morality. Okay, in this given situation, should you do this or should you do that, instead of how to do it? So there has to be, I think, an element of moral values fed into it. You know, compassion, you know, also, it's not just morality, but also compassionate. You have to have compassion for the people involved in that situation. So I think cognition and this moral values and compassion is needed. So it's a little bit expanded from sort of the conventional artificial general intelligence that people are pursuing, I think. Do you agree? Okay, I think we're on the bottom of the hour, 6:30, so Hong Kong time. So I will end this session unless somebody has a pressing questions. So I have my contact on the screen now. Please feel free to connect with me. If you're interested in exploring together, I'd love to get together with you and jam about this a little bit more. Okay, thank you, everybody.